Going to start recording now. Um, so, welcome everyone to the West Seattle Transportation Coalition's June virtual membership meeting. You should see that the meeting has started recording, so do be aware if you have cameras on that your image could be captured when you're speaking, and that may make you choose options like chat for asking questions. And speakers obviously will be capturing you and your PowerPoint presentations, and I may capture embarrassing pictures of you to use on social media, so keep that in mind as well. We thank you for folks. Got underway just a few minutes late, but we were just checking in with our speakers to make sure that everybody had their PowerPoint presentations ready to go. And we will move right along. Tonight's agenda. We will start with some welcome and some introductions that we're in the middle bit of here. We'll take a couple moments just to do a quick approval of meeting minutes. We'll talk a little bit more later, but for folks who want to know what happened either in April or May, as we've gone to virtual meetings, and we now have a YouTube channel. Unfortunately, since we just moved some videos up there, we don't have lots of subscribers, so we have this really ugly link. So unless you go to YouTube and do a search for West Seattle Transportation Coalition, there's the really ugly link to get there at the moment. We will then roll very quickly into a conversation with Seattle Department of Transportation about transportation mitigation during the West Seattle Bridge. We have some guests with us tonight that should probably be familiar to those of you who've been paying attention thus far. Got a couple of links up there on the screen for people who want more info, and they will appear again later on West Seattle Bridge and King County Metro. We will also have a brief conversation with some of our friends from the Port of Seattle about how they're adjusting operations and doing emergency preparations and some things that have happened at Terminal 5. And then after that, we will check in with our board member, Deb Barker, who's on the West Seattle Bridge Community Task Force. We'll chat very quickly about some new business, and then we should be wrapped by 8:30. So those of you who've tuned in just to hear our fabulous guests, we do hope you'll hang out with us a little bit longer. Let's get right into a few different things. So for those of you who are not familiar with the West Seattle Transportation Coalition, or the WSTC, we are a peninsula-wide organization working to address transportation and commuting challenges for the nearly 100,000 people living and working on the West Seattle Peninsula. And we try our best to accomplish this by getting support from residents, engaging our elected officials at all levels to advance the betterment of all transportation modes. We partner with agencies like some of the guests you'll be hearing from tonight, and we do our best to engage with businesses, community groups, special interest groups, and all sorts of folks to build coalitions and educate the public and gather feedback. And we're updating our fabulous handout that's going to talk about things that we've done over the last couple of years that we're really proud of. So hopefully we'll have that by the next meeting to show off. Our legislative priorities. These are our 6 legislative priorities for the year that we developed before everything went kablooey in our world. So we have been looking at West Seattle Bridge Transportation Corridor as one of our #1 issues for a long time. Now, of course, we're looking at detour routes as part of that corridor. We were one of the first organizations actually to do a light rail discussion forum here in the West Seattle area. And we've been following that planning for quite some time. The Fauntleroy Way Boulevard project, which, as you know, is on the back burner at the moment. Delridge Way multimodal projects and Rapid Ride H, which has that nice check there because that is literally underway as we speak. And so that has many people very excited. As well as we've been bird dogging Highland Parkway traffic control, which of course is a very hot topic as well, which is why the check mark is there. And then generally speaking, we're always trying to push that, several of us on the board really believe that The duty of our governments around here is supposed to match infrastructure with growth. We haven't necessarily always done a great job of that here in the Seattle area, and so we're constantly pushing our elected officials to remember that not only should we be matching, but we probably need to do a little bit of catch up. Our growth has outpaced some of our transportation infrastructure in particular here and there. Moving along really quickly, you know, everybody's getting used to these Zoom meeting environments and whatnot, but it's just a nice chance to check in and remind you. You know, we do ask if you are going to be speaking, you know, obviously our guests are going to be on camera, but later on, if you're asking a question, you know, it might be nice to turn on your camera so that we can see people. Although I will remind again, we are recording. Otherwise, during the meeting, please be sure that you're muted unless you've been called on to speak. We do ask, you know, hey, be present, pay attention to what's going on. We invite guests here to give us really great, important information that we hope is relevant to you. And raise your hand if you want to ask a question, and we'll talk more about how you do that. And then finally, just remember, have a good time. There's a chat function if you've never been in the Zoom environment, and folks can feel free to be chatting, you know, making comments that the general attendees can see, as well as you can send private chat messages to folks if you've got friends or other folks who are on here. Again, do remember that if you are sharing things to everyone, we are capturing that for this meeting, and so we will capture whatever it is that you share with everyone. There's some great Zoom keyboard shortcuts I found for old school folks who like to know shortcuts, but here's just a moment. I'm going to toss over to Kate, who is one of our board members and my co-host this evening, to just point out a little bit for folks where to find those spots for chatting and raising your hand. Kate.
Ooh, I did not know I was going to get called on. Okay, so do you want me to go over the shortcuts?
No, I just put them up there for people, you know. No, just
I'm
real quick,
interested in
chatting and
them,
raising
but
your hand. How do you raise a hand to ask a question?
Yeah, next, there should be a participants button on your screen. And if you click on that, you'll get a list of all the participants in the meeting. And there is, if you click on your name, I believe you can raise your hand. Sorry, when you're a host or a co-host, you don't have the ability to raise your hand. So I don't remember how you do it when you're not a host. But I'm pretty sure that it is right there next to your name.
It's at the bottom and of the names on my screen.
Bottom of the name. Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, my screen goes, you know, changes when I'm host. So, and so raising your hand's a great way to get your questions asked. We will try to keep track of who raised their hands first. And also, if you would rather, you can either type your question in the chat window, or you could just note in there that you would like to ask your question, and we can call on you to ask it yourself that way too. So was that what you wanted,
Great.
Michael?
Yep.
Okay, great.
I just don't want people to be hearing me talk too much right now. So introductions. So we are not actually going to go around and have everybody share. However, we will ask you, we'll point you at that chat window. Here's a great chance, you know, if you're willing, you know, give us your name, your pronouns, if, you know, you're hiding under a funny name or something, you know, that's relevant for us to know. Access needs, if you're someone who is, you know, needs some, you know, you're unable to see what's on the screen that we're sharing, or having sound issues, or wherever it is that we might need to know, that's relevant. Feel free to share that there as well. I do know we have folks who are participating, it looks like just by phone. So when we do open for questions, I'll try to give a pause to unmute those and let you ask. If you don't have access to the chat window, feel free to drop your neighborhood in. And then our fun icebreaker question for this meeting, have you driven across the Duwamish River this week? So by one of these detour routes, and, you know, sort of let us know, did you, and which, you know, did you do First Avenue? Have you discovered where the South Park Bridge is, etc. And then finally, if you're joining us brand new because you learned from West Seattle blog or one of your community groups, and you didn't receive an email notification from us about the meeting, we'd love to add you to the WSTC email list. We, generally speaking, send only about 1 or 2 emails a month. It's generally just a reminder of what's coming up for the meeting, and then the occasional message about an important survey or something that one of our partner agencies is trying to get out to the public about. You can switch that private chat window to go to John Wright. He's one of our board members and he's in charge of our email list. And you can just send him your name and your email list, and that will go privately and not be shown to the entire world and not be captured in our private chat. If that's not comfortable for you, you can always email us at info@westseattletc.org. All right, and without further ado, we will roll into our first set of guests. I hope I captured your title correctly, Danielle. We have Heather Marks with us, who is the Director of Downtown Mobility for SDOT. And we also have Danielle Friedman, who I believe is the Strategic Initiatives Advisor, or one of the Strategic Initiatives Advisors in the Seattle Department of Neighborhoods. So welcome aboard. I am going to stop sharing here as we pass over to Danielle to toss up some slides. And then Danielle, or Heather, I guess, feel free to unmute and take it away, whoever's speaking.
I'm going to send you guys a better headshot just for future reference and use.
I thought it was great. We had it from the previous meeting.
It's lovely. I love it. And I also have another one that maybe you could mix it up where my eyes aren't closed. Hi, everyone. It has been a really long day, so I'm going to try to maintain my full professionalism throughout this entire presentation, and I hope I am successful. I also want to say that I'm super pleased to be here, but I also have to leave right after I take questions from the presentation. I am real familiar with Metro's plan, and Lindsay and I and my team talk all the time. So I'm not leaving you alone. I know all those things. Danielle, could we move to the next slide, please? So I want to talk a little bit about the bridge structure and where we are with that, and what we've been doing and what's changed since that fateful day in late March. I want to talk a little bit about Reconnect Seattle, which is the name we're giving for all the work that we want to partner with you on to help us continue to be able to get around during this time. And I understand you guys have some questions, and so we have a few slides that address those, although not all of them are SDOT perfect questions for SDOT, so they may actually be better answered by some other folks who are on the call tonight. Next slide, please. So we like to start every presentation with this this figure because I think it gives everybody a good way to follow along and project where we are. The future of the bridge is still uncertain. It's still standing, so that's really good news. Late this summer, we're going to have enough information to make a recommendation in partnership with the Community Task Force and the Technical Advisory Panel about whether we should repair the bridge or if we should pivot directly to replacement. Everybody has like an initial idea about which way we should go, including myself, but we need to back that up with an actual cost-benefit analysis, and so that's something that we're working on right now. Next slide, please. So on the bridge, we have installed monitoring instrumentation throughout both the high bridge and the low bridge, and this gives us a 24/7 picture of the structural health of both of those important pieces of infrastructure. We've also secured a contractor to complete bridge stabilization, Kramer North America. And actually, if you go down underneath the bridge on the east side, you can see where they are starting to stage for their repair of the Pier 18 lateral bearing, as well as the carbon fiber reinforced polymer wrap. We're continuing to monitor cracking, and we have an RFQ out on the street to find a design team for potential replacement. This doesn't mean we've decided to replace the bridge. We are just making every engineer at SDOT crazy by doing a lot of things simultaneously that they would prefer we would do in sequence. So we just, when the decision is made, we want to be ready to move forward. Next slide, please. So on the ground out there, we have added 6 real-time cameras on the detours. We are constantly adjusting signal timing at 26 intersections. Those 26 intersections are connected with our Transportation Operations Center downtown, and we can adjust signal timing on the fly. And those real-time cameras help us keep an eye on the traffic out there so that we can adjust signal timing to match. We're also displaying travel times on the dynamic message signs via West Marginal Way instead of the West Seattle High Bridge. You all know that we have installed a temporary signal at Highland Parkway and Holden. We have repaved beautifully, if I may say, the 5-way intersection west of the Spokane Street Low Bridge. And we've also repaved Roxbury between 16th and 18th in a collaboration with King County Roads. They actually control the south side of Roxbury, south of the center line. Next slide, please. So in the community, we have held 30 stakeholder group meetings, and by that I mean we have come to speak with 30 groups of folks who have asked us to come in, just like this evening. We've completed our emergency response plan with partners in case the worst happens. We don't expect the worst to happen, but in the event, we want to make sure we have a plan ready. We are communicating regularly through our website and blog, and we've implemented Stay Healthy Streets throughout the peninsula. Next slide, please. So that's what's happening now. What's going to happen next is on July 6th, we are going to launch Reconnect West Seattle after we've had some input from our friends on the Community Task Force and have had a chance to translate all of those materials so that we can be equitable in our outreach. We are looking at expanding low bridge access. You may have heard that between 9 p.m. and 5 a.m. everyone is welcome to use the low bridge. And to reassure the parents of school children out there, we are allowing public and private school buses to use the low bridge during the day. We're still working with our friends at the port as well as others on expanding access further. We just need to make sure we do that very carefully because we need to preserve emergency access. We're also continuing to make improvements on detour routes and make sure those stay in good repair and are well signed. Ongoing signal adjustments and maintenance, as I mentioned. We're also doing the bridge stabilization work, repairing the lateral bearing at Pier 18, carbon fiber reinforced polymer wrap, and also epoxy crack sealing. That's not a structural repair, but it does protect the steel inside the concrete, and that's very important. We're continuing, of course, our meetings with neighbors, organizations, and stakeholders, and are continuing to meet just all the time with the Community Task Force and the Technical Advisory Panel. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit more about Reconnect West Seattle and what our goals are there. We're going to be without this bridge for at least a couple of years. And depending on whether we go with repair or replacement, it could be a little bit longer. So our goal is to maintain similar levels of travel across the Duwamish to those that we saw before the closure of the high-rise bridge. We also want to be very mindful and reduce the environmental injustices that impact communities in the Duwamish Valley. And so through a community-led process, we want to identify the challenges and prioritize the solutions that are going to increase options for transit, bike, pedestrian, and safety on our streets and sidewalks. We want to maintain those similar levels of travel, but we cannot maintain them if everybody stays in their car. We have to explore different options, and that means that SDOT and Metro and the Port and all of your transportation agencies are going to have to work together to make sure that you have those options. Next slide, please. So the West Seattle Mobility Plan is a peninsula-wide plan that outlines a vision for reimagining, reorienting, and providing transportation services that meet the needs of all West Seattle travelers. We know very well that Dan Cipolla, the plumber, cannot take the bus with his tools to work. Absolutely understand that. We also know that there are people who could make some different kinds of choices, maybe not every day, maybe not for every trip, but maybe there are trips that they could explore something different. So we want to make sure that those options are available. That larger planning effort includes close coordination with our friends, especially at Metro, and with our other public and private partners, including the Port and large employers who maybe are offering shuttles to their employees. Next slide, please. We also want to be very mindful, and we want to start with the communities that are most impacted by the closure of the bridge, because the communities of Southern West Seattle, South Park, Georgetown, and SoDo, none of these communities were designed or intended to carry the kind of traffic that they are being asked to carry now. So think twice before you drive through any of those neighborhoods. And we want to work with all of those folks to make sure that we are making improvements in their neighborhoods that protect that quality of life. Next slide, please. So upcoming First Avenue Bridge late night closings for maintenance and repairs. So this is a WashDOT project. It's not an SDOT project. The First Avenue South Bridge is owned and maintained by WashDOT. They have had a long-standing project on their docket to replace the gratings on top of the bridge. They're going to start that work in July. We've been coordinating very closely between their project and the King County wastewater project in Georgetown that still has about 3 weekends of restoration left. There's going to be some overlap, but we're working hard to make sure that those things are separated by enough time and distance. We also, as I mentioned earlier, are allowing folks to use the low bridge at night. So when that First Avenue South Bridge is closed, you can go back to using the low bridge at night. Next slide, please. Let me move the little pictures. Oh, low bridge access. Okay, sorry. Everybody's videos are across the top, and I was trying to move it and having a hard time. You know, can I just address Mark? Hi, Mark. Are you the one in the shadows there? So Admiral is greatly impacted. There's no question about it. Your commute just got a lot worse. When we're talking about the communities most impacted, we are talking about communities that have historic environmental injustices that are now compounded by the 84,000 people that used to take the bridge, and now their only choice is to drive through Georgetown and South Park. So
yeah, people bought their houses in Admiral for ease of access. SDOT failed to maintain the bridge. You lower the speed limit on West Marginal Way. You don't listen to expert traffic engineers. When I sent an email on Saturday, it took a whole week for you to respond. You even got the goddamn thing. I'm sorry. I'm pissed off at SDOT hugely because you guys are totally ignoring the neighborhood. You've not talked about what bus service you're going to add. You just totally ignoring us. We are.
Is this Mark Jacobs? Well, hi, Mark. Okay, Thank you. You may know that Metro offers bus service. I'm sure we're going to hear from them in a little bit. So we have opened up the Low Bridge from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. And I recognize that that doesn't help anybody's commute unless you have a non-traditional type commute. But I feel like it does help a little bit. And I think we're trying to demonstrate that we are paying attention to the data and addressing those that access according to what the data is telling us. Anyone who's driving a school bus, whether it's a public or private school bus, is allowed to use it during the day, so never fear, parents. And of course, people driving emergency response, public transit, and freight. Emergency vehicles have got to remain our top priority. In a global pandemic, that is really important. We're also working closely with employer-operated shuttles. Any large employer that's operating a shuttle that's carrying multiple people, we want to be able to give them access to the Low Bridge. We're also working very closely with my friend Lindsay Wolpa and Sarah Scher at the Office of Economic Development to see what we can do to provide some additional access for maritime workers. And these are workers not to commute. These are workers that during the course of their everyday work have to travel across the Low Bridge to get, for example, from Alaska Marine Lines to Harbor Island. We're also trying to make sure that the policy is going to be both enforceable and dynamic. Things change, and we may have to change who has access on the bridge. We also want to make sure that as we are expanding access, that we're doing so equitably. Next slide, please. Freight on West Marginal Way. Hey, have you guys noticed that traffic on West Marginal Way is really a lot more than it used to? This number, the highest number I've seen was 200%. So it is obvious that that is a hugely busy detour route. Blocked driveways, increased noise and air pollution and cut through traffic, speeding, all these things are really important. We also need to maintain some pedestrian safety, particularly in the vicinity of the Longhouse. We're doing ongoing monitoring and adjusting of signals and of course maintenance, regular meetings with the freight community, and we're developing a larger transportation plan for the corridor, and some of that is going to require some additional funding, so we are on the lookout for all of that. Next slide, please. Ferry queues at Fauntleroy Ferry Dock. So we are coordinating with Washington State Ferries. I will mention that the Washington State Ferries are still only running a 2-boat schedule to the Fauntleroy Ferry Dock, and that that's actually really good because normally they run a 3-boat schedule, and so that actually manages the traffic a little bit. They're working to assign traffic control at the dock and on certain days and during certain times of the day to help mitigate that. I want to hear more from you guys about the U-turn.
Sure.
What you're seeing.
Yeah,
Thank you, Michael.
It has to do with there's been a change in how traffic is directed in and out. Obviously, instead of the traditional heading north up Fauntleroy, folks are now being directed south so that they can have it easier towards Barton and Roxbury. And so what's happening is with more traffic coming towards the ferry from that direction, there's nowhere to queue coming at the ferry from the southbound. So cars are going north past the ferry, and then they're making U-turns wherever the end of the ferry line is, because they can't just go down to a certain spot and turn around. They're just kind of hunting for whoever the last car is and then flipping right there in the middle of the road next to Lincoln Park, where all the people, all the pedestrians and folks with their dogs are walking, and it's become a really dangerous thing.
No one on this call would ever do such a thing, right?
Of course not.
Of course not.
The Fauntleroy Community Association has sent a letter to Councilmember Herbold, and I'm not sure if you got the CC, but it went also to Director Zimbabwe about how we want to reroute traffic coming westbound from the First Avenue Bridge so that it ends up queuing facing south
Okay.
to access the
Okay.
ferry. We don't want
Yeah.
people coming down Barton
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
taking Fifth or Fauntleroy and
So
making.
that makes a lot of sense. And it seems like we could, I don't know that that's something that we can prevent totally, but we definitely can sort of assign a signed route that will help folks get where they need to go a little bit better.
Yeah, Deb Barker has something to say about running everything through Morgan. So we're trying to reduce the impact on Morgan and see if people can turn off of 35th, turn off of California at other points in order to come back to make the southbound queue.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be pretty rad if they could just use Fauntleroy the way they always have.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll definitely get the traffic engineers looking at that and see what we can do to make that a little bit better.
Yeah, and you might, if you haven't received the EFCA's 2 letters, we can forward them to you.
You know, I confess, I'm sure I have received them, and I get a lot of letters. So
what? You get more letters than ours? I'm jealous.
I mean, okay. Maybe you can come read them for me. So I'm sure we did get your letter, no doubt. And I think I'm actually going to go speak with Morgan in, Danielle, do you remember when? Soon. Yes, it's definitely going to be soon. So we'll make sure that the traffic engineers are taking a look at that, and I will be prepared with at least some more knowledge when I come and speak with Morgan Junction. Okay, next slide, please. If you are an anxious kind of person like I am, you will want to know what actions you can take right now. So the first thing you can do is go to our website at seattle.gov/transportation/West Seattle Bridge and click the subscribe now button. That will send all of our freshest blog posts directly to your email inbox. You can also ask questions at 684road@seattle.gov or 684road. I also encourage you to sign up for Alert Seattle. This is well beyond a West Seattle Bridge tool. It's to make sure that you are connected with the emergency alert system for the entire city. So in the event of volcanic eruption, earthquake, plague of locusts, any of those sorts of things, you will get an alert from the city of Seattle so that you know what is happening. Please do continue to plan for post stay home, stay healthy. We simply cannot, all of us, every single time go back to exactly the way things were. I think we know that from a public health perspective and maybe from an environmental perspective, but we also have to think about that from a transportation perspective. And please encourage others to follow those low bridge restrictions. I know how frustrating it is. I really do. But it's so important that we can maintain the supply chain and the emergency access and the transit access on that low bridge. I also would add something, and that is, when you're going to take those detours through Georgetown and South Park, really think about that and what that means to the communities that you're detouring through. And just put that in your basket of things that you think about when you're making a decision, and consider the impact. Plus, Michigan is a disaster. There are so many cars on it. It's just unbelievable. So just ponder those things as you're making your decisions. Michael, I don't know if you would like to moderate the questions or how you want to do that.
I'll have Kate take a quick glance at the chat window to see if we've got anything that's come in. While that's happening, as I promised, looks like we've got 3 of you who are in by telephone. So just in case you're only in by telephone, I'm going to take a moment now and unmute you. So if you are on a telephone, and there's noise or something going on around you, be aware. I'm going to unmute for a moment. And so those of you who are on telephones, you're unmuted. If anyone has a question, now's your chance to go ahead and ask.
Oh, stop. You
All
have
right.
questions.
Hearing none, I'm going to go back to putting you guys on mute. There will be some other opportunities later in the call if you need to ask some questions, and I'll turn over to Kate to go over the chat and see if there's anything there.
Yeah, Dept Barker asked, is it fair to ask the for-profit businesses to pay a fee when they use the Low Bridge for their shuttles? If that happens.
Yeah, I don't, we certainly do have the legislative authority to collect a toll, although we'd have to go to the Washington State Transportation Commission to get permission to do that. But are you talking about asking them to pay for like a permit? Huh. I don't know if we have the legislative authority to do that, Deb, but that's an interesting idea. I can check into that.
Then Mark asks, what was the technical
Okay.
basis to, oh, sorry. What was the technical basis to lower the speed limit on West Marginal Way from 40 to 30?
That is a really good question, Mark, that I believe you've asked the city traffic engineer, Dong Ho. So maybe we can refer back to his answer to that.
Deb, did you want to pop in for a sec? Thought I heard you. Okay. Deb was also asking about, I believe it's the U-turn issue, and that it was highlighted in the Fauntleroy Community Association letter. Did you get that one?
I'm sure that I did get it. I am 100%
among
confident
many.
I got it.
And I recently resent it to y'all this week too. So
Okay, thank you so much.
All right.
We're trying to I'm sorry, for
Yeah.
everybody's benefit, especially when groups send us letters, we're trying to be very thorough as we are answering each of those questions. So it takes a little longer than just letting you know that we got it. So be patient. And like I said, I'm going to come and visit Morgan Junction here pretty soon. So
I'm going to interject one thing. I've not heard anything back from Dong Ho. I've not seen a formal traffic study prepared by the city on that lowering the speed limit. It's not just that corridor. There are other corridors in West Seattle that they've lowered the speed limit, and there's no basis for it. 35th Avenue had a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit. All of a sudden, 25.
Yeah.
What's the basis to do that? These are the
Yeah.
principal corridors being used by rerouted motorists.
Yeah, Mark, I can tell you're really upset. These are
because
really,
it doesn't make any.
These are questions indeed for the city traffic engineer. So I can't help you beyond that. I'm not a traffic engineer. He's the one. All right.
Okay, I've got a couple from Marty. How can we contact SDOT to address poorly sequenced intersection lights?
Traffic signals.
Yes.
You can send a note, like I said, to 684 road at seattle.gov, or you can tell your friendly neighborhood Deb Barker, and I'm sure she will be very happy to bring that up. I will also say that traffic signals are really interesting because they're sequenced in a group, and so they're sequenced for certain kinds of. You might be on the losing end. You might be, as you're going about your way, the non-dominant direction. But let us know where those are. Like I said, we have 26 signals in the peninsula that are connected to our downtown transportation operations center. And so if it's in those corridors, we can change that pretty easily. If it's not, it's a much bigger deal. We actually have to send signal crews out to make that happen.
specific intersection. The specific intersection is 35th and Barton, and the turn light.
Really?
The left turn light sequence eastbound and westbound was 8 seconds. So we need to do.
Yeah, that's based on, in general, that's based on how many vehicles we generally see in that queue, but I can ask him to take a look at it. I know that's one that's connected.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Danielle,
I'm
did you
gonna-
get that 35th and Barton?
I'm going to jump in for a second, Heather.
Okay.
Along some of those lines, and I know Mark sent one of these things because he shared it with the WSTC board as well. I know he has some ideas for small ways that the intersection at Highland Parkway and Marginal Way could be reconfigured for better traffic flow.
I forwarded that to Heather too yesterday.
And we've also heard from some folks a few ideas around Michigan and Corson there. You'd have to do, and so I'm wondering, is there an opportunity? Is there some way that folks could get together with an appropriate SDOT person to talk through some ideas? Because we do hear ideas that are coming from folks, but not everybody is a traffic engineer like Mark and necessarily knows like the right language to use, or maybe the way to draw something that makes sense to an SDOT person. But like, is there an opportunity better than just sending to the info address and saying, I've got this crazy idea. Is it crazy or not?
So if you like, you can send me an email. I'm pretty easy to find. So if it feels better to send it to me, please do. That's a good idea. That's an interesting idea. Danielle and I will take that back to the ranch and see if there's a way that we could make that work in a productive way. Because it's not just about using it's not just about using the right words. There's some fundamental understandings of sort of the way that traffic signals work. It's not super interesting if that's not what you're into, but that's not a bad idea. So let me see if we can get a little ask a signal engineer thing.
And then Kate, I'm going to jump in with one more here that we pulled off of the West Seattle blog, but I know who this person is, so I thought it was a good one to highlight because we've heard this from other folks. And so Joe says, as a car owner and bike rider, I've seen significant improvement to the car detour routes since the bridge closure and zero improvement to bike routes. There's still no protected bike route between the Avalon Triangle and the Junction. There is still no improvement to the bumpy, dangerous bike lanes on East Marginal. There is still no signed bike route between Yesler and 2nd Avenue. There is still no bike route from West Seattle to Georgetown. There is still no bike route leading to the Soto Light Rail Station. And he says, I would gladly bike to many of those places, but I will see you all in traffic instead, because presumably he's not feeling very safe, especially at commute times, at going out into that. And so what is SDOT looking at?
So in general, I get in trouble when I talk about bikes. Either the cyclists get mad at me or the non-cyclists get mad at me. So I'm gonna try to play it straight down the middle this time. SDOT, along with the neighborhood traffic plans, traffic mitigation plans, as well as the peninsula-wide plan, has some network connectivity plans for bicycles and for freight. Those will also be released on July 6th, so everyone can take a peek at those and express, your opinion about whether those meet your needs or not. That protected bike route between Avalon Triangle and the Junction, it's complicated even when the only thing you're taking into consideration is cars. But I completely agree that could use some help. We've also applied for a federal grant to help us with a whole new thing on East Marginal Way. So I know that there's a project plan for there. We just need to find the money for it. These other ones I'm not super familiar with, but that doesn't mean we're not working on them. Our bike team's pretty dedicated. It's just a question of lining up both the money as well as the community support to make those things happen. So keep your eyes peeled for what's coming out on July 6th, and hopefully that'll answer some of your questions.
And I'd like to throw a plug in. West Seattle Bike Connections is meeting on the 7th of July, and we definitely plan to discuss those projects.
Danielle, am I going? Is that one that I'm going to?
Yes.
Have I been invited?
Yes.
Yes, you have.
Oh, okay. Well, I will be very happy to speak with you then, and we can talk about my brand new electric bike.
Yeah, which brand?
Flash.
Oh,
I got the Flash Commuter Deluxe. I got it from Second Gear Sporting Goods.
Yay, in Morgan Junction.
sure. Right.
Yep.
I like those people.
Nice.
Oh, Deb has a question too.
I just want to clarify something that Heather was talking about how do you get comments to folks, and it's great that Heather is accepting.
Wait, she's muted.
I think we lost you, Deb.
Yeah. Oh.
I wonder if she was going to say that you can send things to West Seattle Bridge at seattle.gov now as a way also that we can get your emails and respond.
And honestly, they all end up at the same spot. So whichever way makes you feel most heard, please do feel free to do that.
I also just learned though about the transportation demand management team that Bill Laborde is willing to forward things to. So I've sent things to Bill that go to that team versus.
Sure. Yeah. Anytime any comment comes into any part of SDOT, we look at it and decide which team needs to answer the question and send it. So whether you send it to Bill or me or West Seattle Bridge or 684 Road, it all goes through that same process. It's how we can keep track of our correspondence.
Fair enough. It was just nice to have that other alternative so I don't snow you all the time with email.
You are hardly the only one, my dear. All right.
Okay, I'll pop back into the chat questions. Has SDOT begun exploring feasibility of the immersed tunnel option?
No, we have not, and here's why. We haven't decided whether we are repairing the current bridge or replacing it. If we decide that we are going to replace the bridge, we will do what is called a type, size, and location study, and that will examine different options. Would we rebuild the bridge exactly like it is where it is right now? Would we move it someplace else? Would we do a tunnel instead? And through that process, we identify it's called the preferred alternative that we would then do our environmental documentation for, and that's what leads either to an environmental assessment or an EIS. So, and that I'll just alert you guys that the environmental process takes a really long time. And it is my fond and fervent hope that whatever comes out of the type, size, and location study, whether it is a tunnel or a replacement bridge, that we will all be able to coalesce behind it. Because if we have a situation where we pick the alternative that you don't like best, and it creates an environmental situation, it will slow things down like you would not believe. So my hope is that through our type, size, and location process, we can be transparent enough and answer enough questions that whether we end up with a tunnel or a bridge, everybody understands why we got there and why it's the best choice. Does that make sense, Kate?
Yep.
I don't have an opinion one way or the other.
Whatever is best.
Whatever's best, right?
I'm going to keep plugging away at the chat questions. Mark is asking about the status of adding bus 56 and 57 all day. Should we punt that one? I believe we've got somebody from Metro here.
Yeah, that's a good question for Metro. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if we've got anyone from Metro on the call, so we may have to
So
We
punt to
do.
another.
yeah, hi
Oh, we
everyone.
do.
This
Hi.
is Steve Crosley from Metro on the call, and
Excellent.
I can't answer that question in my presentation, or I could answer it now, however anyone would like.
We can do the presentation.
Okay.
Yeah.
That way Heather can, we can roll through questions for Heather first.
Marty, you're my favorite.
There we go. Let's wrap up questions for Heather then. I want to hear from Metro.
And I'm kind of browsing through some of this as side conversation, not exactly questions. Yeah, John Wright notes that he feels like a lot of the intersections are kind of, the sequencing is still assuming the high bridge is open for business. And I think I've heard people mention that on Fauntleroy and 35th. Nobody's going through Fauntleroy, but the light still cycles through that, or at least did.
Yeah, you know, I was just on my bicycle at that intersection, and I noticed that it was a little different than it used to be. That's just anecdotal, so don't take that as gospel. I'll definitely talk with the signal engineers and see if there's anything they can do to improve that. Fauntleroy is still an arterial in the city, and people should still use it. So it doesn't end up where it used to end up, but it's still a good street.
35th and Fauntleroy and 35th and Avalon, both those signals, they need to retime them because they're still timed based on the old patterns.
Okay, I will definitely discuss that with them.
And I'd like to.
Do we have any other questions, Kate?
Let's see. Actually, let's see. Larry is asking about how seriously SDOT's considering the immersed tube tunnel, which I think you addressed, but also how close are we to a decision point?
Yeah, so you at a certain point you can go back to the presentation, and there was that decision tree, that green and blue decision tree. You can take a look at that. We should have at least a recommendation by the end of the summer, as long as we all agree that summer ends on September 20th on the fall equinox. So we plan to have the cost benefit analysis before that, and we'll have had conversations with our technical advisory panel as well as the community task force. And the hope is that we will all be able to coalesce around the repair or replacement decision so that we can start to move forward. I won't tell you what my favorite is right now.
May I ask one crazy question that seems logical, but this process sounds counterintuitive to me? That why double the amount of time we would wait? That is, repair, which lasts only so long, and then 6 years of replacement, which total of 10 or 12 years, when just do 6 to 8 out of the gate and have a replacement finished in a short time.
Well, you are not the only one that has that opinion. I will say that there are others who think that we should get in there and repair the bridge and get it open to some level of traffic as we take a little bit longer to plan the new bridge. I'm not 100% moved by that, but fortunately for everybody, I'm not making the decision on my own. So we'll be making that decision based on the cost benefit analysis that will have a more thorough, it's not just a time question, it's not just a money question, it's not just a durability question, it's a reliability question, and it's a resiliency question. So we'll take all of those things into consideration in the cost benefit analysis, and we'll of course share that with everybody in our spirit of transparency. Thanks, Marty.
Okay.
All right, we're at 7:30. Do we have one
Can I
last?
do one more?
Yes.
Oh,
All right.
Okay, I got one
sorry.
more in the chat.
Sorry, Steve.
Lloyd mentions that targeting businesses with a fee or toll to use the lower bridge will result in higher price for their product. And I just wanted to point out that as a board, a couple of us have bounced around the idea of charging a fee. And what we've talked about was just a fee for shuttle buses, like the Microsoft shuttle and, you know, Starbucks, not
that's what we mean by the employer
use.
shuttle.
Yeah. So I just
Right.
wanted to clarify what we were talking
Yeah.
about there.
Mhm.
So,
Okay.
oh, and Deb had a reply to something. Sorry, Deb, I missed that one. Is it still pertinent? Okay.
All right, I'm
Onward.
going to move us along then and thank Heather and Danielle.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Steve, is it okay if we jump over to the port really quickly? We promised Lindsay we would let them do their piece quick and move on to some other things and not be stuck in the meeting. Can we come back to you a little later?
Sure.
All right, I appreciate it.
You're a patriot, Steve.
Let me stop sharing here then. And Lindsay, you should be able to grab a hold for your slides.
All right, is that working now? Hello, everybody.
Hi, Lindsay.
Yeah. Although I apologize, I probably should have done an actual introduction for you.
Well, that's okay. That's my job.
Well, there we go.
Hi,
so
let me turn my video
take it
on.
away, Mick Schultz, who is also with us.
Yes. Well, I'm just the PR guy. I do community engagement work for the Port of Seattle, but I've been to quite a few of your meetings, and I know many of you well. So it's an honor to be here, and I want to introduce the colleagues of mine who are going to be talking to you tonight, and some of them you already know. We have Zach Thomas, who is the director of the Operations Service Center for the Northwest Seaport Alliance. And we have Emma Del Vento. She's and I know she's spoken with your group fairly recently. She is the project manager for the Terminal 5 Improvements Project. And we have Christine Wolf, again, who I know has spoken with this group before. And she is a transportation planner with the Northwest Seaport Alliance. And finally, Lindsay Wolpa, who is a community engagement team member and also handles local government relations for the Port of Seattle and the Northwest Seaport here in what we call the North Harbor. And I also support the Northwest Seaport Alliance here in the North Harbor. And with that, I'll turn it over to my colleagues.
Thanks so much, Mick. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Great. So I appreciate the earlier timing. As I mentioned to Marty, I have a 10-month-old son who I can hear is losing his mind in another room. So I just wanted to be able to move on to that. So thank you so much. So I'm going to go to the next slide here. Oh, let's see. There we go. Before I turn it over to Emma, we thought this picture would be helpful. Obviously, this group is very familiar with the Terminal 5 project. I think the last time I saw you guys was an in-person meeting maybe 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. This project has been something that's been underway since 2014. It's something that's an enormous deal for the Port of Seattle and the Northwest Seaport Alliance. And the proximity of this to the bridge is something that we just wanted to highlight in the conversation. In terms of current operations, as folks know, we haven't had cargo happening there from 2014 to 2019. The terminal was dark. We just started domestic operations in 2019 on the south berth from Matson Shipping. And we're targeting to restart international operations coming spring, which we are all very excited about. We appreciate that the community is a little less concerned. I guess I should have started with one thing. Like many of you, I'm a West Seattle resident. I live in the Alki neighborhood. So I am in the north end that is very affected by this bridge closure. So I am living this every day, and I can appreciate all sides of this issue. So this is something broadly that I understand both from my employer side, but as well as a community member. And so with that, let me turn it over to Emma, who is our T5 guru, to give you guys just a brief update of where the project stands and kind of key milestones there. Emma, I know you called in. Are you on your computer or on the phone?
I'm on my computer. Is the audio and video coming in okay?
Perfect.
They look good.
All right.
Okay.
Hey, everyone. Good to see you all again. And thanks for the intro, Mick and Lindsay. So T5 program construction is moving forward pretty much on schedule. Considering COVID, we're really proud of the team out there. They're working really well, collaborative, and trying to be leaders in the region for the response to the crisis and how to manage it. So health and safety is being managed in a really awesome and notable way. So currently they're building the north berth, and so that's the part further up in Lindsay's photo. And they aim to have construction finished there in the first part of next year. So we're now kind of in the 10-month window there. And following that, you'll see the arrival of the cranes, which will be an exciting time to watch them roll in, and the start of international operations. As that finishes, the crew's going to migrate to the upgrade of the south berth, and that will be ongoing for about 1.5 years, and they aim to finish the program by the end of 2022. Then the other ongoing work that you'll see after that date are going to be uplands projects, so stormwater and other components. In the meantime, there'll also be work that we've spoken about previously around the gate and some of the traffic management projects, and 2 marine buildings are going to be popping up the end of this year and beginning of next year. So a lot happening, and I'm happy to catch up with any questions. Thank you.
Next up, we have Zach Thomas. I don't know if there's questions in that. I can't see the chat now, but if we want to just keep moving along, I'll leave it to Kate and Michael if you guys want us to pause for questions.
Okay.
I think we're good. Keep going.
All right, Zach Thomas, on to you.
Terrific. Thank you. Just quickly looking at the map that we have up here. I'm the director of the Operations Service Center, so my group works with the terminals and the other tenants that we have, along with really working with everybody that's in the marine section, working on the Duwamish, and then all the interconnected roadways. And so, you know, even though our trucks aren't up on the high bridge, with the high bridge being closed, obviously that sent traffic in multiple different directions. We heard a 200% increase or something like that on West Marginal. So, you know, we're advocating for those folks that are relying on these roadways and the waterways to obviously to continue that access. They're traveling between these different terminals, and you know, it's been an interesting working with all of the different stakeholders and making sure that you know, we maintain that access. So that's kind of where we're at with the terminals. Also happy to answer any questions.
Why don't we just keep rolling through and finish the slides, and then we'll do Q&A.
All right. So we just thought it would be helpful just to lay out for you guys. This is the internal working groups that we have going on that are matching a lot of the work happening with interagencies. As Heather mentioned a couple times in her presentation, I'm in touch with SDOT on several times a daily basis. In addition to that, we are also a member, one of our commission president is on the community task force with Deb and others. As you can see here, you know, the emergency contingency planning. We also have a group that's looking at water transportation. We would love to see expanded access for the water taxi. It's something that, you know, as SDOT was discussing, some of our workers don't have an option to be able to commute in a different way. They have to access their locations near the lower bridge. And so the Port of Seattle and the Seaport Alliance is looking at something. Is there a possibility of providing increased water transportation options? In addition, we are looking down the long term to support the city. It is a city asset, it's a city project, but it is of course very important to not only the Port of Seattle, but the entire maritime economy. So we have a group that's already starting to discuss and support advocacy efforts at the state level and the federal level as well. And finally, just regular outreach and communications and making sure that we, while SDOT and the city is the main show for this, we want to make sure we're communicating with various groups and the kind of work that we're doing. And that is all we had today. Oops. There we go. Nice little shot of downtown Seattle from Jack Block Park. We really appreciate you guys having us here today. We have a handful, we have also Christine Wolf here, and as mentioned, we're happy to answer any questions, and we're happy to come back as this project evolves along the way, because it is something that is definitely front and center for us and will be for a long time. Michael, I believe you're muted.
Thank you. It didn't click. As I promised before, I'm going to go back to the telephones. It looks like we've got only 2 of you now. So again, folks who are on the phones, I'm going to unmute right now, so be prepared for that. And if either of you on the telephone need to ask a question right now, here is your opportunity. Meanwhile, Kate, take a quick glance at the chat and see if anything's there.
I'm going to start with Deb so she can stop raising her hand.
All right. Well, not hearing anything from the phones, I am going to put you guys back on mute. And I guess we will, let's hand over to Deb for her question.
Hi, everybody. Port, I just, news to me about the sequencing of this, starting from the north, getting that done, moving to the south. What sort of constraints do the construction team deal with when they're going to work on the southern portion of T5, when the northern portion is in operation with what are they? They're not called super tankers, whatever they're
Post Panamex.
Those ones. I would have thought that it would have been done the other way, do the south end first and then the north end, blah, blah, blah. But what sort of challenges are there for doing it this way?
Well, look, I'm going to turn it over to Emma in just a minute, but to have her answer that. But this is actually and I'm sorry that was not clear before, but this has been our plan for a few years now. But I will let Emma get into the details of that.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. That's a really interesting question and really relevant. A lot of people debated it at length, and it was actually at one stage the preferred option for a number of reasons. So so there are definitely some trade-offs. Was there an area in particular that you were thinking that you wanted clarification on for what some of those trade-offs
No,
were?
I was just curious about.
I think I lost some of the audio there.
Did you hear your mute again, Deb?
Sorry. Say again.
I heard you were just curious about.
Just thank you for showing the map. If you're loading at the northern portion and you're trying to do in-ground or underwater work at the southern portion, what sort of challenges do you have? How do you get past A&B?
Yeah, so they've established kind of an intermediate buffer zone.
Okay.
They understand that the ships are not going to be there all the time every day, so working around the ship schedule is going to be done, and aligned with the permit restrictions.
Okay.
And so I think operationally they have a really good handle on what their work's like, having started in an almost unencumbered environment in the north area.
Great.
So there's a lot of confidence in the way forward, but until you get there, and then it's going to get exciting.
Okay. From the map, it looks like a very small area for a lot of conflicting things to be going on. But hey, that's the nature of West Seattle right now.
Yeah, and with operations, actually, the way that their gate infrastructure works, and it's kind of on the bottom right end or edge, it really will actually work out very well for the second part of the construction to be, in that upper right-hand area.
Yeah.
Trucks will be able to work their way around that actually very, very easily. So in terms of phasing and operations, the two work very well together in doing it in that direction.
Good to know. Thank you so much.
All right,
Okay,
over
I'm
to you,
gonna
Kate.
turn over to the chat window then. I've got a list from Marty. One, have you looked at the immersed tunnel replacement for the High Bridge idea, or are you taking your cue from SDOT?
We are taking our cue from SDOT. We do, we've been asked that question quite a bit, as has everybody out here in the peninsula and involved in this. It is something that would involve a lot of different agencies. And we do, for example, upriver, which you can see here, Terminal 115, it would be access issues in terms of the Coast Guard when they install that construction. So the Coast Guard would play a very critical role. The tribes would play a very critical role because of fishing access. It's not to say that it's not impossible, but we, along with everyone else, will have that conversation. But as with this, impacts to operations is something to keep front of mind.
Okay. Also a question about the health of and repair progress of the Low Bridge and our transit emergency and non-port freight vehicles crowding out traffic for port activities.
So the Low Bridge is a SDOT asset, so I will leave questions on the health of the bridge to that agency. In terms of the crowding issue, as Heather talked about in her presentation, we are grateful for the work, the coordination and collaboration with the city. It has been a challenge. We have had great access for freight right now. It's something that as we open up more and more, and there's more commuter pressure types of things that happen, we do have concerns. We hope that the decision to open nighttime traffic will be helpful, and we hope that we can come to a place where some of those maritime workers will get that access. In addition, I think we're very mindful of when things start. It's been about 6 years and since there was international operations at Terminal 5. I've been a West Seattle resident for about a decade, and I think how quickly we forget. And so we want to make sure that when things come next spring that we're all ready for that. So I guess the short answer is today we're okay, but we're very focused on what happens in the next 6 to 12 months.
Okay, do you expect proposed access changes and camera monitoring to work efficiently and well?
We hope so. We're pleased that the city is moving forward with an enforcement camera plan. We think that's a great approach. I think as we all know, the devil's in the details, and we think that will be helpful in smoothing this access issue. But I think we'll all wait and see. And I think we're again pleased the city's been working with us on this throughout the details.
Okay. Then how are the Port and City managing ingress egress on the east side of Harbor Island and managing freight truck queuing?
Great question. That is something that I think is probably beyond the impacts of the West Seattle Bridge. And I'm going to turn that over to my colleague, Zach, to talk a little bit about that piece of it.
Yeah, sure. I think we've had a great partnership with both SDOT and WashDOT, looking at, traffic patterns are obviously changing. Of course, COVID-19 has also changed things. And so we really have been working closely with them on looking at those freight flows that in normal times are kind of hidden because there's so much other traffic. And now that traffic was pulled out, we really could watch what was going on. We've had some, watching it come in off of the highway, across the viaduct and then down into the terminals. And we're in constant discussions with them, either on a daily basis when we're seeing congestion happening or talking about the longer term as traffic returns. What are the things that we can do to help mitigate those impacts and make sure that freight is flowing into the terminals, and keeping the impacts on the commuters as low as possible. So it's an ongoing discussion for sure.
Okay. Let's see. Next question is really an SDOT one. What information can you share about timeframe and decisions for repair versus reconstruction of High Bridge? Is there anybody to address that still?
I think we will just skip that for the moment.
Yeah.
I
Okay,
could say,
so okay.
they're trying to have a decision by the end of the summer. She was said earlier about the repair or replace.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
And
Danielle.
back to port. Submerged tunnel versus bridge. How does the port regard this idea? And can construction be managed as port upgrades and runs operations on T5?
Yeah, so I think we already talked about the tunnel issue a little bit. And I think, again, another one, the devil's in the details. Obviously, construction, it's a constrained corridor. We've been in conversations, with talking about Sound Transit 3, about impacts of the construction there. So it's something that we look forward to working closely with our partners at the city in how that construction planning unfolds. It's critical that operations manages. We just are going to have to figure out a way through it together. These are international container terminals. T5 will be operational. At T18 is the busiest container terminal in the Northwest. So we look forward to just coming up with a plan that balances the needs of construction and as well as the needs of the community in the area.
Okay, John Wright would like to know where he can find a copy of the map with all the port terminals, the one on the screen now, I believe.
John Wright, if I have your email address, I will happily send it to you.
I'll also say that the Northwest Seaport Alliance website has, if not this exact map, maps that are very similar for both Seattle and Tacoma, along with a lot of great information just about the terminals in general. So I highly recommend you check out the Northwest Seaport Alliance website.
Thanks, Zach. I will, yeah, the brochure, hopefully the brochure that shows this is on there, and we can send along the link afterwards for those details.
Okay, and I think the last question is Tracy from the West Seattle blog. Question for Emma, when are the new cranes arriving?
Take it away, Emma.
Yeah, so the new cranes, we're looking early April of next year. And hopefully with Mick and Lindsay, we'll release something so that everyone can watch their entrance.
It's pretty cool. When it happened a couple years ago or last year with Port of Tacoma, the Tacoma cranes, they're pretty. It's pretty fun watching them come in.
Yeah, they should be 4 of them packed on a ship, and so getting them to the berth is going to be an adventure, and then offloading them is going to take at least a day each.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'll turn it back to you, Michael.
Well, thank you very much, guys. We always love to have port folks with us. And we've long time been following all the planning and things getting underway with Terminal 5. But of course, I want to reiterate that as we move through all this stuff with the bridge, like, we consider you guys important, stakeholders just like everyone else. And so we also want to be talking with you and hearing from you about the impacts that traffic mitigation and planning and things are having on your operations as well. We know you guys have a pretty good line into everybody to get your needs met, but we still, like to hear from you about those as well, and not just what's going on at Terminal 5. So we'd love to have
We
you
appreciate
back
that, Michael.
anytime.
Thank you. And we feel very much the same way about the West Seattle Transportation Coalition and the whole West Seattle community. We want to be as close as we can with you and try to achieve shared goals. So thank you.
All right. I'm going to keep us moving along.
Thanks for having us today. We look forward to being back.
All right. Steve, hopefully we haven't had you cooling your heels too much there.
I'm still here, Michael.
I'm going to, we'll see if I got this correct. Threw something together really quickly here. So I believe that we have Steve Crossley, who I believe you're the Transit Integration Program Manager with King County Metro.
I am actually. Some of you may actually recognize me from some of the West Seattle Ballard Link Extension meetings, and my primary role is the bus rail integration manager with King County Metro, working with Sound Transit. However, with all of this COVID pandemic stuff going on, I have been reassigned, and one of my new jobs is to manage the West Seattle Bridge response. I am also a West Seattle resident, just like Heather Marks and Chris Arkeels. I live in the Pigeon Point neighborhood. The 120 is my primary route. I take the 125. I also take the C line and the 50. So I'm both a Metro employee and a customer here in Seattle. And my first name is Steve. And I'm actually going to put it in the chat box. I don't believe I'll be able to answer every single question that may come up. So please feel free to email me, and I will be able to get those questions out and answered by any subject matter expert. So Michael, I believe attached to the city presentation was my presentation in there. So I'm hoping you're able to pull that up for me.
That's not good because I did not get that unless Danielle has those slides.
It was actually part of. It was actually. I was like embedded within the City of Seattle slides.
Let's see. Is Danielle still with us?
I am. I didn't know that though. Let me.
Do you have something in there, Danielle?
Let's check.
Yeah, when working, actually, I edited slides. They were actually like after the City of Seattle slides. I had Metro slides in there. I think about 6 or 7 slides in the presentation.
Got it. Yep.
All right.
I will stop and let Danielle grab that again.
Thank you.
I know. I was just filling in too for someone, so I didn't.
Thank you, Danielle.
Yeah. Hold on one sec. Let me share. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Matt. It was Madison that was putting together the slides for us today.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble.
And I know there were 4 specific questions that were asked by the West Seattle Transportation Coalition, and I will get to those at the end of the presentation. And I just want to highlight with the first 6 or 7 slides just where Metro is at and where we are headed over the next couple of months and next year. And then I know there are some specific questions about adjustments being made between now and September, as well as there was a question about the 22 and the 37. And then a question about how we can propose new routes. So I will be happy to.
I love it when our guests are well prepped.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you, Danielle.
Okay. Yeah. Let me just tell me when you want me to advance it.
Next slide. Okay, perfect. So this is just I'll just highlight just as a quick presentation, and then I'm happy to answer questions. So I just want to highlight that before COVID, basically pre-baseline, fall 2019, we had 13 routes across the bridge. We had about 900 trips per day that crossed the bridge, including our all-day routes and our peak routes. We carried about 19,000 daily passengers across the bridge, and so it's basically if you're looking at the load factor, we call load factor, the last stop in West Seattle to the first stop in downtown or SoDo, and back again, we're carrying about 19,000 passengers per day. That does not include all the intra West Seattle trips that we're also making. So if someone from the junction going to White Center, et cetera. And we know that transit service is very crucial, not just for the commute trips, but for school, entertainment, and more, all going from West Seattle outside to the rest of the city and to the rest of the region. Next slide, please. Metro was making a number of service reductions. We essentially ratcheted down service after the COVID pandemic really hit the Seattle area hard, and those service reductions happened in March and April. We suspended all of the peak commuter routes. The ridership went down very heavily on those routes, and we found that our crossing of the Duwamish on those routes and and the all-day routes, the C line, the 120, et cetera, was down about 90%. Overall, our system-wide ridership was only down about 75%. So in West Seattle, it is a very commute-heavy ridership. The water taxi service also went down to 2 AM and PM sailings per weekday, and we suspended those shuttles, the 773 and 775. Our ridership on the water taxi was down about 95% or more during that period of time. So basically, the heavy commute market was just not able to be served, and Metro responded appropriately during Washington's stay-at-home, stay-healthy order. Next slide, please. So I want to talk about what is happening now. Heather Marks is not on the phone, but we have been coordinating really well with Heather. Heather is my point of contact at Metro, or at SDOT. And our focus really right now, because we are using the low bridge, is to maintain a very reliable, quick pathway into and out of downtown and SoDo from those routes that currently cross the high bridge. They have implemented a number of transit priority improvements. Heather touched on a bunch of those, but in terms of transit priority, I have a picture up there. Since I live in Pigeon Point, that's my own photo. I went down, and that is looking at Delridge northbound. Ounces over, going to be on your left, and up there is the bridge and the on-ramp to the high bridge. They rechannelized the entirety of Delridge. We now have a continuous bus lane all the way from Oregon to the slip lane on the Spokane Street Bridge. At the Chelan 5-way intersection, they've also striped a bus-only lane that allows our buses to enter that on-ramp without other vehicle traffic. Freight obviously can use those lanes as well. So we're actually very happy with the partnership with the City of Seattle. And again, our goal is really to keep these buses moving reliably. I took the 120 into downtown a couple days ago. It took me about 9 minutes from the Genesee and Delridge stop to get into downtown and back, or downtown, and same amount of time getting back. Without any of the bridge openings, we were actually maintaining a very reliable network. I just want to highlight to the West Seattle Transportation Coalition that even though we have changed our pathway from the high bridge to the low bridge, there are literally no stops that have changed for our current service, for our current customers. We are simply operating on the low bridge, and once we, essentially on the low bridge, we can get back on the on-ramp to our either the 99 North, or we can get onto the First Avenue South ramps. One special thing that we really did and worked together with the City of Seattle on was allowing transit access on the First Avenue South ramps that get to the West Seattle Bridge. That prevents us from operating on Spokane Street, which caused about 60-minute delays because BNSF switching. So we're really happy with that partnership. We're currently monitoring all loads on our network, and we are able to add supplemental service based upon social distancing requirements, and I'm happy to get into that. But unfortunately, our coaches are limited to 12 passengers per 40-foot coach and 18 passengers per 60-foot coach at the current time. We are noticing a lot of overcrowding in areas other than West Seattle, and we have been adding supplemental trips on the A line, the F line, the E line, Route 70, et cetera, in areas where we are monitoring that on a daily basis. Next slide, please. So we've been working on a West Seattle Bridge action plan to keep West Seattleites moving from Metro's perspective in coordination with the City of Seattle. Our action plan addresses the near-term needs basically now until September and primarily focused on service reliability and accessibility. We are anticipating that a lot of employment will not return to office work before September or even after September. And then we also have an action plan that addresses the longer-term needs, anticipating traffic congestion and returning to office work and a greater demand into downtown. And this will also include gaining back customers that we lost, gaining new customers that would make transit much easier to take than driving. And so we will have a good customer communications plan to be able to bring those folks back to transit and to be able to better understand how to take transit into and out of key destinations. I also want to highlight that in our planning scenario, we are hoping for the low bridge to remain open indefinitely. That is our plan. But we do have a number of scenarios, both with what we call my system impacts group, which does immediate reroutes if needed. And then we have our service planning group has also prepared scenarios if and when there is a high bridge collapse scenario. That is looking less and less likely, which thankfully is, we're all hopeful for that. But there have actually been a couple of incidents recently where they actually had to close the low bridge. There was a fire in the marina, there was a malfunction of the low bridge. And in that instance, we revert to immediate reroutes on West Marginal Way through the First Avenue South Bridge. Next slide, please. So Metro is a mobility agency. We are not just a transit agency, and we want to highlight that we are looking at all sorts of mobility solutions to move West Seattleites for commute services, for school, for shopping, etc. Fixed route is obviously our workhorse. It carries the most amount of passengers and customers. We also have a very robust water taxi system from Seacrest Dock. We're also very highly encouraging bike and walk mode shares. We have a very robust van pool program. Our van pool program is obviously very depressed at the moment because there are very few van pools running, with the exception of essential van pools. But we do have a lot of vans available, and that is based upon employer subsidies. We can also look at first and last mile solutions. We're also in consultation with the City of Seattle on improving park and rides, and we are always open to other innovative ideas. Want to highlight though with the bold point that I have down there, that Metro is a countywide agency and we are extremely financially constrained at this point. We have lost the Seattle Transit Benefit District funding. We've also lost a lot of sales tax revenue. We are facing pretty significant service cuts from now through September 2021. And we also need to just balance everything on a countywide basis with equity and other issues in terms of financial feasibility. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to highlight, and this is one of the questions is, what happened on June 22nd and what's going to happen from June 22nd to our planned service change in September. On June 22nd, we did increase service system-wide. We are now at about 85% system-wide of our trips pre-COVID. In West Seattle, we resumed routes 21X, which is a peak commuter route, and that serves Arbor Heights, and that was an area that was not served during the route suspension. We also added back the route 125, which is an all-day route. Even though South Seattle College is not operating right now, it is an all-day route, and now we have all-day routes operating through West Seattle, which includes the 50, the 21, the C line, the 120, and now the 125. The water taxi service was increased to its regular winter schedule or off-peak schedule, which includes 6 round-trip sailings in the AM and PM commute period. We have noticed a slight uptick in ridership during that time, and actually the water taxi, I believe, has actually almost doubled ridership since it has increased its number of sailings. In September, the 2020 service change in September, there is going to be a restoration of some peak period routes. I just want to highlight, though, that we are actually bringing back more peak commuter service in West Seattle than our service guidelines would necessarily suggest us to do. We were bringing back the 55, the 56, and the 57 in September, but because of the Seattle Transit Benefit District cuts, they will not have as many trips as the pre-COVID or say fall 2019 service plan. We're continuing to suspend Route 37 and the Vashon Island routes, the 116, 118, and 119. The Vashon Island routes, 118 and 119, will be on island and will serve the ferry terminal there for either Washington State Ferries or the Vashon Island water taxi. I also want to highlight, sorry, my cat's making some noise over there. I also want to highlight that we have about, sorry about that. We have about 110 commuter vans that are available, and employer subsidies will cover those. Right now, because of physical distancing, we are obviously at some challenges in terms of adding more than a couple folks to a van pool. right now. I think we have about, I think I got the numbers today, we have about 8 or 9 emergency van pool formations, and those all are going to healthcare providers such as Virginia Mason, Swedish, etc. Do want to highlight that with third-party funding, Metro could increase fixed route service and or water taxi service levels, and then I'm sure we'll want to get into a conversation about increased or new service in West Seattle. Next slide, please. That might be it. Oh, and here are the questions for Metro. So how does the June 22nd service increase affect West Seattle? So that is one thing that I did just answer. Happy to answer additional questions on that. I do see a bunch of chat questions, which I'll get to in a moment. But I do want to highlight that the other questions that were directly asked to Metro via this meeting, and how will West Seattle adjustments be made between June 22nd and the September service change. So what I want to highlight is that there's not a highly likelihood that we will be able to make a whole lot of changes between now and September, but we are continuously monitoring loads. We do monitor passenger loads on a daily basis. Our goal is to not leave passengers behind. We do not want people waiting for multiple buses. And so if we do see that demand is increasing in the West Seattle area, that we do have some capacity to add supplemental trips to those services. So that is one thing that I do want to highlight. So we also are going to be monitoring large employers. And again, West Seattle being a heavy commute market, we want to make sure that if there are employers sending people back to the offices, that we are able to review that ridership data and again add service if we need to, if there are any clusters of crowding, etc. So just to highlight that system-wide, we're going to be introducing very little peak service, but because of the situation in West Seattle, that the 55, 56, and 57 will be restored in September. Now we're getting back to rationale for elimination of Route 22 and Route 37. So they have not been eliminated, they've been suspended, and I'm not a service planner, so I put my email there, and you can certainly email me about this, and if I don't answer it in the way that you're looking for an answer, it is suspended right now. In March, Metro will not be going for a service change ordinance. Will be going for administrative change, which is something less than an ordinance that does not require county approval. We'll be continuing to monitor that demand, and we'll be making those decisions on Route 22 and Route 37, I think, for the fall of 2021. But it's a very tough question to answer, and I hate to put it in these terms, but the 22 and 27 have had very low ridership, and Metro has had to make some very, very tough decisions in our extremely financially constrained environment about what routes to run. Overall, I just want to point out, when the 22 was connected to the 21, that portion of the 22 that was currently operating only accounted for about 4% of the 21 ridership. So we truncated that, and that was all part of the C-line restructure. So
I'll jump in here for a moment on this, Steve,
yes,
because we hear from a lot of people on this.
Yes.
So I'd love it if you go back and tell folks in the office that we were really mean and beat you up over this.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can. Yeah, beat me up over 22. Yeah.
But Metro needs to stop talking about equity and looking about, serving neighborhoods and getting close to homes and things like that. Even though the 21 runs, what's key about the 22 is it runs all the way up the hill to the top of Arbor Heights. Arbor Heights is not full. It is not full of tons of people with huge houses with water views. There are some up there, but there are a heck of a lot of people up there who are not high income. And this is service that was cut during the last recession by Metro, with promises to bring it back, and they have never brought it back fully. They brought back some peak service, and then when lots of folks, they certainly told us, so I'm sure they told Metro, said we can't use the service because we can't count on the schedule, we can't count on frequency, and so I'm forced to drive to the junction, I'm forced to other places to get the bus. And while that may have worked over the last few years, if we are looking at needing to convert all sorts of people into bus riders who weren't bus riders before, not serving a huge neighborhood in West Seattle seems to be like a significant problem that Metro needs to look at.
Okay, no, I will take that back to my service planning group, and they, that's something that we will consider. And I just want to stress that, Metro does have to make some extremely tough decisions based upon our financial resources. And I do want to highlight that Metro is focusing on equity, but again, West Seattle is an area of need. And so I just want to highlight that it's not something that is off the table, and we are more than happy to take a look back at that. And I can get back to the group. We can get back to the group with service planning on Route 22 at one of your next meetings. So thank you, Michael. And then I think the last question is, and this is probably related to the Route 22, how can we propose new routes for consideration in West Seattle, or, say a second attempt at the Ride 2 pilot or the VIA that's going on in Southeast Seattle. So, Metro is always open to new ideas. We have a market innovation group, and we have been promoting all these new mobility options. I just want to highlight that fixed route is obviously the most productive. It costs the least per boarding. And so in a very fiscally challenged time, we need to look at cost benefit and how we can serve the most amount of riders for the lowest cost per boarding. And so again, cost benefit is something that we need to consider, but we will always want to look at new solutions. Again, want to highlight that we are in close consultation with the City of Seattle. Our action plan takes us from now to September and to March 2021. And that does not mean that if we are able to locate additional third-party funding, whether that's through Metro, whether that is through the city, whether it's through state or other sources, that we could not look at bringing back new services or adding new services. So that is essentially a point that I want to make, in addition to the fact that we've been analyzing our travel flows. I've been looking with my team at Teralytics data, which is cell phone data. The city's been looking at the same thing, and our data is showing that between 5 and 9 a.m., really the heaviest flow is from West Seattle into the CBD and into SoDo. And so, investing in the current fixed route network and the water taxi network would likely provide the biggest bang for the buck to start, but that does not mean that if we have additional funding available that we cannot look at additional routes. And again, we do have a very robust community service planning process, and that is something that I think we will be bringing back to the community, in the next couple quarters, as Metro understands its financial situation a little bit better. And I think that probably ends my presentation. There's a whole bunch of questions in there. I don't know if someone's going to help prime me with these questions, or if I should just go ahead and...
Kate's going to help with that.
Yeah, okay, great.
But we probably won't have time for all of them. So if Kate wants to sort of try and get to some of the best, go for it, Kate.
Yeah, I'd say that, there are a lot of people asking about more service. Just the 56, the 22 comes up over and over again. 37 leaves another area completely unserved.
Yes.
And I just want to pop in because with the Reconnect West Seattle and the bridge closure, SDOT is indicating that they need way more people to take the bus to get across. Anyways, they're expecting like a 75% increase in bus ridership in order to accommodate all the people who need to get across the Duwamish. And I don't understand how we can do that with less service everywhere.
I don't have a great answer for anyone on this call. I am very challenged and frustrated with the inability right now for us to serve more than 12 people per 40-foot bus and 18 people per 60-foot bus. We are working together with the city on a whole bunch of capacity calculations. The city's plan is looking at a single AM peak hour. Our capacity calculations are looking at a 4-hour peak. And I would say that, if we were able to increase service to pre-COVID levels or fall 19 levels, and we did not have social distancing, and again, I have no idea when and when that's going to end, and that's not something that's way above my pay grade. That with the water taxi and with Metro fixed route service, we are probably really close to being able to meet that capacity. Now, I do want to highlight that, the 125 doesn't have as high ridership as the C line, and so to bring it all together as an aggregate is probably not the best way to look at it, but that's how we're looking at it right now. And so hopefully in September, when we bring back the 55, 56, 57, that will bring additional capacity. I also want to highlight that I don't think anyone knows when people are starting to go back to work. King County or Metro or all of King County is on work at home until early September, similarly with SDOT. And, we need to obviously be very proactive and be much more responsive to increases in demand. And I think at this point, things are just so uncertain. We just don't really know whether, everything's going to come completely back to normal levels. And that's what SDOT's targets are essentially looking at, is what would happen if it was completely pre-COVID. So again, we want to make sure we're being as responsive as possible within our own financial constraints. And we will continually look to the city and other areas to third-party funding to increase service as it is needed. And so again, our goal is to meet that demand and to not have people, sit at a bus and wait at a bus stop and have 5 buses pass them. I lived in San Francisco for a number of years, and I used to have 5 or 6 buses pass me every single day, and I know how that feels. And so again, as a Metro employee and a Metro customer, we want to make sure that we are serving that need. I think one of the big challenges, I do want to highlight that one of the big challenges is that when we start looking at other direct routes that go to areas that may have need for people who used to drive, that starts to get really expensive, and then you start to have winners and losers in certain areas. And so we are going to continuously look at all of that, but again, there is a certain cost involved, and that is going to continue over this summer period as we look at both finances, ridership, and what kind of service planning demand would be. But again, we want to make sure we are working with the community to understand what those needs are.
Okay, great. Sorry, I had to get that off my chest. Yeah. And it just, when we're being asked to take the bus by, the city and then aren't sure about the service that we're going to get, it's tricky.
No,
more concrete questions.
Yeah, no, Kate, I'm sorry. Right now, Kate, it's the social distancing, and I can't give you a good answer on that. That's the biggest challenge. Our 60-foot coaches should be able to fit about 80 people on them, and we can fit 16 people on them right now. And so I just don't have a great answer until we can try and move away from that. And unfortunately, it seems like the trends right now in the United States are not going too well. And I'm hopeful, but we've got to. I think there's going to be a few more months before we really understand where we're able to head.
I'd like to interject. We need the 56, 57 midday service. Actually, we need midday service pretty much that serves all of West Seattle. And it gets us into downtown Seattle, because the more West Seattle residents that can get to downtown, the less of them have to drive, leaving the driving. I mean, you're right. It's not cost effective to provide a direct route really to the east side, but it is reasonably effective to provide that ride to downtown Seattle where people can pick up the light rail or whatever. And so you need to provide midday service throughout West Seattle. I suspect starting in September when schools open up. I understand the university and other universities are going to be opening up in the fall. A lot of students need to be able to get to school, and they're not on the typical 8 to 5 schedule. And I really pressing for the 56, 57, because when I first moved in this house, my son commuted to UW from home and was able to get to and from school relatively easily because the 56, 57 ran all day long.
Mark, I hear you, and I'll bring that back to my service planning group. It probably doesn't probably not going to sway you with this, but obviously you can take the 128 or the 50 and connect to the
No, I
C line
can't.
in
Not
downtown.
from where I'm at.
Okay.
No, I'm up by the lookout.
Okay.
Those are not options that are reasonable.
Yep. And you know, we are looking at increasing park and ride options. We are looking at we're looking with the city if there's additional parking available at the junction and certain employer areas that we could provide for parking for people to park and
parking
ride.
options are not there because the city just installed all the no parking signs. I mean, or unless you live there.
Yeah, I know. What I mean is that there are a number of large businesses such as the Safeway, the QFC, et cetera, that we could look at that actually has additional parking, or even the Whole Foods. So we are looking at all options, but understanding that there is a gap in the Admiral District area for transit service. We do acknowledge that, and we will try and address that. Unfortunately, as our plan right now is with our financially constrained plan, the 55, 56, and 57 will come back as peak commuter routes in September.
That's not acceptable. The city, you need to bring back midday service. And not just the Admiral, but the other parts of West Seattle.
We only got time for a couple of questions here. So.
Okay, I've got a request for a bus stop on Harbor Island for workers.
Oh, yes. I actually have a great answer for that. We've been working with the port on that. We've been working with Jerry Poor and Steve Queen on that. We actually have the temporary stops already marked. We have approval from the city of Seattle for temporary stops on Harbor Island. They're going to be, don't know exactly where I don't know the exact street name, but they're within a quarter-mile walk of the marina where SSA is, and so we have been in close consultation there. The challenge that the port is having is for North Harbor Island workers, Metro does not have the funding to add a shuttle for that, and so it would be a kind of maritime industrial employer consortium that would need to fund that shuttle. But there is a whole host of businesses that it's easily walkable from where we're going to put the temporary stops along Spokane Street. We plan to add all routes to that stop, and so anyone from West Seattle can get off at that stop. I actually have a port worker that lives across the street from me, and just because of the way they go in to get their union jobs, et cetera, it's a bit challenging, but we do know that all of the kind of office employers to the south in the marina, that temporary stops will be very beneficial, and we should have those implemented relatively soon.
Great. Are you looking at allowing Metro, or is the city looking at allowing Metro van pools across the lower bridge?
Yes, we have made that request a couple of times. I think right now, at this point in time, the reason why the city is putting it into a future bucket is because van pools do not have a large number of folks just because of physical distancing. Our van pools are not really in operation. So, however, we do have emergency van pools, and we will be requesting again for the emergency van pool formations to be able to be allowed to use the low bridge. We do believe that van pools will be the next step, including shared employer shuttles, et cetera, to be allowed to use the low bridge. We have temporal distributions of all of our van pools. We had 49 van pools prior to COVID that were operating in West Seattle. Most of them Metro. We had a couple Kitsap, and we had a couple CT community transit van pools. It is something that we are very heavily focused on, is allowing van pools to use that low bridge. It is a good carrot, and we understand that there's going to be destinations that are not well served by fixed route transit via a one-seat ride, and so we think that van pool can actually really increase its importance in West Seattle to serve those more far-flung areas.
Okay. From John Wright, since West Seattle is cut off on account of the bridge closure, is Metro willing to move service hours from other parts of King County to support our need for additional transit?
That is a great question, and that is above my pay grade at this point. We are faced with just immense service cuts system wide. I have not received word yet from, say, our general manager that we will be reallocating service hours to West Seattle specifically for that purpose. We are in consultation with the city to identify additional funding and third-party funding. There may be a ballot initiative to renew the Seattle Transit Benefit District this fall, and I believe that that would include specific hours for West Seattle. But again, I just want to speak as a countywide organization. I can't speak for the fact that we could reallocate that. It could be tomorrow morning that Rob Gannon, our general manager, says, yes, we're going to do that. But at this point in time, I don't have a definitive answer for you. But I will say that as of September, for our all-day routes, we will be operating almost all trips on our all-day routes, and on the 55, 50, 56, and 57. Those normally would not have been brought back, but because of the West Seattle Bridge closure, we are bringing those routes back. Actually, most peak commuter routes are not coming back in September countywide, but the 55, 56, and 57 are. And in June, and this Monday, we also brought back the 21X, which is a peak commuter route, which serves Arbor Heights. So we are doing small ways to benefit West Seattle, but I can't answer definitively if we have a whole bunch of service hours we can add to that beyond that.
I hate to say it, but I think
Oh,
we've got
can I
time
do
for
one more?
but we are past 8:30, and I do want to let our guests go since we are supposed to be ending at 8:30. For those who can stay, the board will be discussing a few more things for a few more minutes, but I want to honor our guest time and let them get back to their personal lives.
Yeah.
And I apologize that there are a couple comments at the bottom I haven't even gotten to, but from Don Brubeck, this will be the last one. What is the cost for adding a water taxi at winter or summer schedule, and how does it compare to adding bus runs?
That's a great question. So we operate our system on service hours, and it's a little bit different than the water taxi schedule, just because service hours, excuse me, include deadhead. Oh my gosh, sorry, my cat's going through there again. And adding frequency on the bus is slightly different than adding frequency in the water taxi. I actually do have some financials for the water taxi. We believe the next best, increase in water taxi service would be add a second boat to the commute period. We are going to continue on our winter schedule until mid-April 2021. We fully plan to go back to our summer schedule that is budgeted for our Marine Division, which includes off-peak and weekend service. I'm hoping I'll be able to attend a Mariners game next year and be able to come back on the water taxi on Friday nights. But our biggest bang for the buck, if the commute market returns and we are trying to meet these targets that SDOT is putting forth in terms of these mode split, is to add that second boat that allows us to have 3 trips per hour out of Seacrest Dock, and that allows us to have 11 or more, around 11 commute period trips. And that cost is going to be at a little over $1 million, about $1.3 million a year just in operations costs for that. And that includes our boat. Again, that is not budgeted. And so again, that's third-party funding that we would need to find. In terms of service hours for buses, just to get back to our pre-COVID levels, we would need, I think, about additional 55,000 hours. And if I can multiply that by $174 an hour pretty quickly, that's getting into the $5 million, $6 million range. So it actually is a little bit more cost effective if we're just focusing on that commute period to bring back some water taxi service. Again, there's some challenges there because Seacrest is limited in terms of its access. We may need to bring additional shuttles to Seacrest Dock. We may need additional parking, and I did not quote any of those costs for the folks. But again, Metro does have all that information, and we are looking at how we can increase that service. In addition to, if we went to more of a community-driven service change process, looking at new routes or new connections as well.
Okay, Michael?
All righty, and with that, thank you very much,
Yeah.
Steve. But I do unfortunately need to
Yeah.
keep us moving on here.
Sure.
As I said for folks, you know, our meetings are scheduled to end at 8:30. But there were a few other things on the agenda tonight. Unless Deb has anything particular from community task force meeting to share with us, I would skip past that. But there are just a couple more bits of business we'd like to do otherwise. So if folks are interested in hanging out, I'll aim to get us done by 8:45 here, hopefully. Deb.
All right, I'm going to talk briefly about the community task force, the what's called Reconnect West Seattle, the ambitious mobility action plan that Heather talked about. The task force received on Friday the 19th a very large amount of draft material that's for each neighborhood. South Park, Georgetown, the SoDo, the Southern West Seattle area, bikes and freight plans. So what these have, and I'm just going to show you that they're going to have an introduction, a lot of text, a lot of goals, and how much needs to change. Then there'll be a map for each area, and then there'll be a list that ranges from 2 pages to 6 pages of all sorts of ideas for each community to ponder and rate and see if that's going to be enough mitigation to help with the impact of having so much changed traffic situations. So these are draft, and the committee was asked to give feedback on them. I reviewed them, and you know, for instance, the one for the Southwest Seattle has 5 pages of potential action plan items, and these would have been collected from the different communities, such as Highland Park's comments are in there. Bike Connections comments are in, West Seattle Bike Connections comments are hopefully in the bike plan. Interesting to see the SoDo plan having, you can tell that there's been so many different studies going on in SoDo because there's like 6 different studies that go all the way back to the stadium study about how to deal with traffic. So it's going to be really challenging for the neighborhoods to take a look at these plans and sift through them and figure out, you know, however they're going to get rated, what's going to work best for a community to have this proposal or this project put together. The project has to be less than $100,000 and doable in a year. Danielle Friedman is leading a lot of that through Department of Neighborhoods. And Danielle, do you want to maybe chime in about timing on that?
Yeah, and I just want to say that we have done significant we've taken a lot of the feedback and we've made significant changes to the materials. We're going to send out probably another round shortly. We made them easier to read. We cut out a lot of some of the old stuff, so just made it easier. They're going to be online and paper surveys, and we're scrambling to get them done so we can get them translated into multiple languages, and it'll be coming out hopefully the week of July 6th is our goal.
Out on July 6th. And then you're also taking these kind of the presentations also to the individual neighborhoods. I know that they're coming to the Morgan Community Association on July 15 and hopefully other neighborhoods. I know that you'll be doing a lot of neighborhood outreach on that. So be on the lookout for when that comes out to talk that up around.
Oh, Deb, your mute kicked on again.
Uh-oh.
We seem to
Highland
lose
Park
Deb.
and Georgetown.
Deb, we keep losing you, Deb.
Well, I keep losing a lot of people. be kind when you are looking at these things, to think about the neighborhoods that are really having tremendous impacts. So there's a lot of interesting plans, but have a large heart when you're looking at all of this. I also wanted to share that I got a copy of a Stuart, Florida state of emergency for hazardous conditions. This was a declaration of an emergency. Stuart, Florida has a bridge kind of similar to the West Seattle Bridge that is newer than ours and has an emergency closure. Traffic is horrendous. And this declaration of emergency came out about 4 days after the bridge closed. So if anyone is interested in this, I have shared it with folks at SDOT and DON, and I'm just excited to see what Florida was doing with their emergency declaration. I think that's it for the task force. It's interesting doing absolutely everything through chat functions and a different sort of online format, but it's very worthwhile and it's a great thing to listen to and be involved in. Questions?
All righty. Thank you, Deb. I'm going to keep us moving through a couple of quick things here and then wrap up. If folks have questions for Deb, why don't you drop them in the chat window. I mentioned earlier, but I do want to show here really quickly. Where is it? As I said, we do have a YouTube page, which hopefully is showing up on the screen. We're still building it out, so it needs some improvements, but we've got our April and May, and the June meeting will go up. I think it usually takes 5-6 hours for it all to get rendered and processed by Zoom, so I will try to get it up probably by Saturday. Give me some time to get to it. I know Dawn, I believe Dawn is on the call. I also want to give a bit of a shout out here. If folks haven't seen this video, and I don't know if it will share my sound or not. Let's see. And so hopefully folks heard sound, but if not, there was some narration on there. But big thank you out to West Seattle Bike Connections and volunteers also from Highland Park Action Committee. There were a number of folks who realized that, hey, isn't there a sidewalk over there on the side of Highland Parkway, and where did it go? And so folks went out, and it looks like they were properly socially distancing and wearing masks, thank you. But did back-breaking work there and dug out a whole bunch of dirt and things to try and give bicyclists a little bit of extra help getting up the hill from one trail connecting to the other to get in and out of West Seattle. So big kudos there to Dawn and all the volunteers.
Thank you, Michael. It was a lot of fun to do that project. It's more fun than slugging through meetings and writing letters to SDOT to actually just get out there with a pick and shovel
All right, thank you. And then last thing, you know, we always tend to get behind on these things, I feel, every year, but particularly going into this virtual world and COVID. But once again, normally we would have elections for board members happening today in accordance with our bylaws. A number of board members who are in the odd numbered positions, or sorry, the even numbered positions. We were an even year, so those are up. So normally that would have happened today. So just notice that our July meeting, we will combine and do nominations and elections. So board members who are interested in running for re-election, think about that. If you, and if you're attending, if you or someone you know might be interested in joining our board and helping represent groups that you don't think are currently represented, we want to hear from you. Happy to answer questions. Folks can email us at info@westseattletc.org if you've got questions or nominate folks you think we should chat with. Again, we'll entertain nominations and do that as part of our meeting next month. It is 8:46. If there are not any burning questions or comments, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Deb has her hand up.
Just want to add that there is an ST3 meeting tomorrow, or sorry, June 29th with Sound Transit and the Avalon neighborhood. Let me know if you want the connection information. It's a Zoom meeting.
If you could send it to me, I'd appreciate it.
I will. So I move that we adjourn.
All right. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, then thank you for everyone for hanging out the additional 17 minutes. And we look forward to seeing you again in our virtual environment next month, fourth Thursday of every month as usual. And we will talk to you then. Bye-bye.
Good night.